Hey, leaders and managers, Marcel here. I got this leadership development course out right now, and it's getting fantastic reviews. So I want to tell you a little bit about it because it might be for you. It's called From Boss to Leader, and it teaches emerging leaders and managers those servant leadership skills, the everyday stuff that you need to inspire, engage, and motivate your team for high performance, to get bottom line results. Now, we're not just taking anyone for this course. We want to make sure that you're truly invested in your growth as a servant leader. So if you'd like to explore whether this experience is really for you or your team of managers, visit my website right now, marcelschwantes.com, and click on training.
The future of work isn't about shareholder value, technology, metrics, or automation. It's about being human and putting people first through actionable love. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, where we hold deep conversations with extraordinary people to help you grow as a leader and expand your business. Here's your host, Marcel Schwantes.
Hey, welcome to the last episode of 2022. Hope everyone had a fantastic Christmas and wonderful holidays wherever you are and however you celebrate. Glad you could join us. We circle the globe now in 167 countries. And if you're just joining us for the first time and you like what you hear, we would love it if you could share this episode with someone in a leadership or management role. Leadership has never been more challenging than the last 3 years. Can I hear an amen here? So let me speak to you leaders directly here, okay? You may hold the expertise and you may have all the power and the authority to make really important decisions because, well, you're the expert. You have the experience, right? And most of you, I imagine, are, you're prepared to react or respond in really complicated situations, to problem solve those big things that are well within your area of expertise. You're ready. You're good to go. Bring it on, you say. But here's the thing. You're also human. And it's okay to say, hey, I don't know everything. Because not everything is going to fit the mold of what you do know. Whatever you were trained for, what you're good at. So in those moments, we need to invite the discovery of other perspectives and make sense of the situation in new ways to facilitate the best way forward. And in the way that our expertise or experience, may not have prepared us to do. So that's really the premise for today's show. I'm going to be talking with Dr. Richard Winters, an emergency physician who wrote a compelling new book called You're the Leader. Now what? Leadership Lessons from Mayo Clinic. Based on years of experience and lessons from one of the world's leading hospitals, the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Winters outlines effective tactics to lead through complex challenges. He's going to help us today, whether you're a new or a more seasoned leader, to navigate your organizational challenges with emotional intelligence and really the collective strengths of your team. On top of being a leading emergency physician, Dr. Winters is also an executive coach and director of leadership development for the Mayo Clinic Care Network. And Dr. Winters now joins us. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So we have this kickoff question for listeners to kind of get to know you a little bit. And it's kind of a way to draw them into your why and, your whole purpose for doing what you do. So here's the question. You ready?
Yes.
What's your story?
What's my story? I was born, and from the moment I was delivered, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so I got to this point. No, so I think, I don't know if for anyone out there listening I have two daughters. One is in senior year of high school and the other is in college. I was not an easy kid, I don't think, for my parents. My grade point average in high school, I graduated with a C- grade point average. And so I was not a good student. I was doing a lot of punk rock and skateboards and radio and things like that. At some point, though, as I transitioned out of high school, my grandmother had Lou Gehrig's disease, and we took care of her at our house. And all of a sudden, I started experiencing kind of the medical world. Then I started volunteering at the hospital. I started really focusing on getting good grades. And then, somehow I've ended up here where I'm at right now. When I first told my parents I want to be a doctor, they very appropriately laughed. Very appropriately. Yeah. So I think that's kind of best encapsulates my story.
That's a cool story. Yeah, it's funny. So we probably are around the same age because I was big into the punk rock and new wave scene as well, late 70s, early mid 80s as well.
Yeah.
Oh boy. So okay, so let's dive into this and explore this fantastic book of yours. Okay, I want to start from the sort of the 30,000-foot level. Okay, why this book? Why now?
Yeah. So imagine, I'm an emergency physician. I've finished my residency. Now I'm in practice and I'm taking care of patients, and I'm starting to see things that are not going as I think like they could go the best. And so either like I'm shouting into the abyss or I'm trying to figure out like what to do. And so then I'm going to meetings and I'm realizing that while I'm at the patient's bedside and I kind of generally know what to do and I can write orders, when I'm in a meeting, doesn't work out so well. And then somewhere along the way, I got an MBA and then also did graduate school for executive coaching. And I started coaching other leaders and started experiencing the same thing where you have these individuals who are these experts who really can take care of patients and with the most complex illnesses. But then you get them in a room and you're talking about kind of business and how to improve processes and stuff. And people just face these challenges. And the question that they would often ask me as a coach is, now what? And it's oftentimes after they've maybe alienated a group of colleagues or kind of put themselves into a corner. And so the book is for that. Those leaders who can just open up something and figure out, okay, so now I'm in this jam. What do I do?
Yeah. And it's funny because I find a lot of the people that I coach as well in the exact same predicament. So I want to highlight something to kind of kick us off. It's a quote from chapter 1. You say that leaders have a decision-making flaw. And so quoting you now, we tend to overplay our expertise and let our expertise guide our actions. But there are times when our robotic reflex to decide short circuits optimal decision-making. Unpack that for us.
Yeah. I mean, and so I mean, for all of us, right? We woke up this morning and we put on some clothes. We decided what to eat. And oftentimes these are just like really things, they just pop into our mind. We start to walk across the street. We stop because there's a bus coming. There's these things just kind of reflexively that we know what to do. And then oftentimes these sorts of reflexes carry into work too. I mean, as an emergency physician, when someone comes in and they've been shot or they have a heart attack, I reflexively know what to do in those moments based on my experience. And that works really well. But then there are often times where we're faced with these situations where that gets in the way, where we're prematurely deciding on what to do, really complex issues. And so we'll be sitting in a meeting and someone will say, how do we best staff to meet the needs of our customers? Or how do we change the schedule? Or how do we, really complex issues. And in a moment, we just know what to do. And so how do we step back from that? Because it's good to not be hit by a bus. It's good to be able to take care of our patients or customers very efficiently. But to be able to solve complex issues, you need to step away from that.
Yeah. So what's a good example of how you've seen leaders kind of, overplay their expertise? Maybe your own personal example in the emergency room. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so, geez, we don't have many hours. I have lots of experiences of doing this. I mean, so let's start out at home. I said I have 2 teenage daughters, and so one of them is in high school, and she comes home and she talks about her day, and she's like, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. And I don't know. I've been to high school. I have this experience. And so in the moment, I just like, well, this is what you should do. And have you considered doing this? And it's just me getting in the way. And so instead of stepping back and trying to understand what her perspective is, what's going on. And so that's the home situation. Go to work and similar sort of thing. I mean, whether that be in the trauma room, I may have in a moment an idea of what's going on, but unless I'm stepping back and making sure that I'm not anchoring on my initial kind of thoughts, I may miss key things. And so I need to be stepping back, talking to the nurses, talking to the pharmacists, the paramedics, things like that. And then meetings the same way. I mean, again, I think I could, if your listeners want to do this, we can have them, like, we can set up a phone number they can call in, and I can just solve all their problems. They can just tell me it, and in one sentence I would know what they should do. This happens all the time, and it's just not, I'm not right in those moments.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to get to the point where we understand how to overcome this, because it's really a blind spot, right, Richard? I mean, it's a blind spot to rely on sort of your perspective and overplay your expertise. So we got to figure out how to overcome that. But you have this amazing story I want you to share about Victor Trastek, who was a thoracic surgeon, right?
Yeah. So Vic Trastek, he's a great guy. And so, and his story is not dissimilar. I have to say I experienced similar to myself, is where, so he's this great thoracic surgeon. I mean, really looked up highly within the organization, who is taking wonderful care of patients. And early on in his career, again, taking wonderful care of patients, doing these kind of miracle, surgeries and things like that. He'd walk down the hall and the nurses would scatter. Like they'd hide in the broom closet. They'd like try to get out of the way, because in his mind, he's taking the best care of patients. And it's really kind of this micromanaging situation. But what he was doing was, he was oftentimes kind of coming across as quite angry, limiting the interactions with other individuals, cutting them off, and kind of going out there to get things done in his way, but finding that actually was alienating things, and then realizing that actually this is not the best way of taking care of patients, because people aren't feeling free to speak up. And so at one point, one of the nursing leaders took him aside and said, "Hey, I don't know if you realize this, but people are running away from you. They're afraid of you." And for him in that moment to realize, whoa, this is not who I am. This is not what I want to be. And I see what's going on. And then to step back and to figure out how he wants to be, kind of the values he has and how he wants to behave, and really change those behaviors. And he did. And so then he was heading up a professionalism. He became the CEO of Mayo Clinic in Arizona. And now he's an executive coach for many of our leaders. And again, this is something for me, I can think about moments where I had made scribes cry, and I didn't want to, but it was just my approach. And so how in those moments where things aren't going the way I want them to, how do we change?
Yeah. So, well, in Victor's case, he had a nursing leader actually confront, good for her or him, to confront somebody that is of a higher stature, because I would imagine in hospital settings that physicians, especially surgeons, have this godlike complex where not too many people want to confront them, right? And so,
even fellow surgeons.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you said that it wasn't until he was confronted with his behavior, which was a complete blind spot to him. He had no idea that he was causing this lack of safety in nurses, right? I mean, they were scurrying as soon as they saw him walking down the hall. So what it took? Is somebody to actually confront and give him the feedback he needed to hear that he didn't know? Or was there some other element of, okay, what was the transition for Victor?
Yeah. I mean, I think all of us face these moments where we get feedback, and are we going to listen to them or not? And I could imagine at that time he may have just said, your nurses just need to change. They need to work around me. But for him, this individual to be able to take those insights and to be able to look at himself and figure out the way that he wants to be, and how he's not actually reflecting how he wants to be, is a big deal. And the cool thing about this is that there's now this video you can see on YouTube that shows kind of this interaction. I asked him, "Hey, Vic, is this okay? I feel I'm right. I'm going to write about this. Is this all right?" And he's like, "Yeah, this is a story that needs to be told." And so this is an individual who's a leader, who's able to reflect upon how they want to be, and then change to be that way.
Yeah, I can't help it, but the leadership strength of humility played a factor here, I'm assuming, but it sounds like that's what it really took for Victor to be able to kind of see how the craziness that he was creating around him, and then be humble enough to admit, okay, there's some developing of my self-awareness here that needs to take place, and some change that needs to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So is there, turning the page to the next, I want to move to the next section here, but for anybody that's listening and going, hey, that might be me, my blind spot is that I might just rely too much on my own perspective and the voices in my own head. So I might be overplaying my expertise. Is there a way to overcome that blind spot?
So I think for me, the question is how to realize in the moment. And then a lot of that is, and I'm just thinking about yesterday, my daughter, I live in a small house with one bathroom. My daughter is about to take a shower. I was like, oh, I need to use the bathroom. I go in, I quickly use the bathroom. I get out and she's like, you didn't wash your hands. And I'm like, okay. I was trying to get out as fast as possible. Usually I go to the kitchen sink when you're in this sort of situation. And for me, it took me aside, honestly. And it made me feel like, geez, really? I mean, I'm trying to do this for you. But then in the moment, like just reflecting and thinking, okay, what is she needing out of this? Like there's something that she needs out of this. How am I approaching this? Because I want to continue having good conversations with my daughter. And then how to kind of change. And so for me, it took a few minutes, but then I went back and apologized for my initial kind of gruff response to her. And I think that's the key thing is to look for these moments where we're uncomfortable. And those moments where we're uncomfortable, where we feel like maybe the others are being mean to us, are oftentimes these moments where, maybe we're not being the best way that we can to them. And so I would just say, look for those interactions.
Yeah. There's your EQ right there, Richard. I think is that, again, to be aware of not only what's going on inside of you, your own emotions, your feelings, but also how those things, what those things are creating around you, right? How is it affecting other people? That takes.
Yeah, my initial instinct was like, do you know how often I wash my hands? Like I'm a professional hand washer, and now, and so, but she was right, and there were things about this that were important to her. So,
okay, so what I've seen in so often in my own coaching clients, is this need to be right. They're stuck in their own stories. They seek to get an agreement and kind of consensus that kind of fits with their own narrative or their own bias. And this is kind of the topic of chapter 3 of your book, that we don't seek out perspectives to challenge our own perception of reality. Talk us through a little bit on that.
Yeah, the need to be right. I mean, we need to feel. I mean, I like to feel like I'm adding something to the world. And I like to have a sense that my expertise matters and that my experience matters, and that I've figured out some ways to get some things done. And so if I'm in a situation where I'm feeling like that is at risk, where maybe I'm not going to be valued anymore, and then maybe what's the purpose here? What am I actually adding? And am I at risk here? Is this something that and so I think this sense of needing to be right is a place of being able to be comfortable and being able to in many cases not have to face kind of these difficult aspects of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that we're not so comfortable with, but actually those parts of ourselves that really helped promote us to change in ways that are better for us and for others.
Yeah. What might help is something that you called mind traps. You referenced someone else's research that keeps us stuck in our own blind spots. What are maybe one or two of these key mind traps?
Yeah, and so Jennifer Garvey Berger, and I'd encourage you to look her up. Jennifer Garvey Berger has written some wonderful books, and the mind traps are really, she highlights a few of the cognitive biases that we have. So one of the biases is our ability just to tell a story. It's like simple stories, create simple stories about just little bits of data that we see and that we hear within our organization. And so I'm here in Minnesota right now, and I could look up in the sky at night and I can see stars. And as humans, we've somehow put these stars into these constellations, where there's someone holding a bow and an arrow, there's an ox. I mean, all these sorts of things these are just dots in the sky. And so for me, I can look up at the star and I can see a beer and a taco. I've just put these dots together in a different way. This same sort of thing happens though when we're in meetings or where we hear about, so and so got promoted, and I know why they got promoted. They got promoted because they had this relationship with this individual, and because they did that, and there's this favoritism, and we're just pulling these little disparate facts together. Or someone gets fired, and I know why they got the boot. They got the boot because of this, and this. Like, we can hear these stories, and it makes sense that these little bits of information that we can put these things together to create stories. But oftentimes, these stories are just like, I don't know, it's not nonfiction. It's kind of creative.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. They're false narratives.
False narratives.
Yeah. And we're scripting it in our heads and making it real for us when there's really, it's not reality based on reality at all. So
yeah, they're saying this to me because of blah, 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 blah. And you know what? Actually, they're not even really thinking about you.
Okay, I want to throw a metaphor at you from your book. Okay, so you say that we need to step off the dance floor and step up to the balcony. I love it, but what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, the metaphor. I mean, they're things that I think about on a daily basis, and so that's a metaphor. Stepping off the dance floor and getting onto the balcony that I learned from Ron Heifetz, an individual out of Harvard. And the idea is that each of us have this perspective of our lives and what's going on as we're engaging with our friends and with our colleagues, our family members. And as we do something, we kind of hear the music and we see how they might respond, and we can predict, and then we respond in kind. And it's kind of a very predictive and also very reflexive thing. I mean, we have these moves that we just kind of go to, and it's helpful. But it's also helpful to be able to kind of take ourselves out of that moment where we need to respond and find some different perspective. And so what we can do is we can get up onto the balcony, kind of the balcony that overlooks the dance floor. And so, and as we do that, we start to see that, you know, maybe the way I reacted in that meeting, maybe the way I just reacted to my daughter, maybe there was something else that was going on there. And maybe my dance, the way I reflexively respond in that moment wasn't how I would like to respond. And as we get up onto the balcony, we can start to see things and consider things from different perspectives. We can start to consider things from other people's perspectives. We can start to maybe see things that we might do differently, in different ways that we might approach the situation. And so for me, like, it's how do I get on the balcony? How do I get on the balcony? And whether that is, how do I, as a leader, get a group of my colleagues together up on the balcony? Or how do I, as in these one-to-one conversations, help this other individual get out of these reflexes that they're in, to be able to just step up and see themselves and their existence from a different perspective? So healthy.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's interesting that okay, so the topic of burnout, I'm going to transition to talk about how to bring more people up with you to step up to the balcony, but frame it around this whole chapter that you wrote about understanding burnout and well-being. So, you know, it's in everybody's mind right now. It's on leaders' radars, HR people. They're all talking about burnout since the pandemic hit. And of course, well-being is now, it's a trending word, right? So sticking with this metaphor of stepping up to the balcony and broadening our perspective, you said we can now have a better understanding of burnout and the drivers that cause burnout, because I think that so many of us don't really get what burnout is. We tag along with what the media is portraying burnout to be and all that. You're a physician. You should know. I mean, you're in the front lines of seeing people burning out. So maybe, I don't know, what's a good starting point here for this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, and so, you know, talking about the dance floor, I mean, just think about if you were to go look on social media and look about burnout, you're going to see a lot of people who are reflexively saying things from the dance floor. They're blaming the leaders. They're blaming whoever the president is. They're blaming there's just so much of the stuff that's going on. And how helpful is that? It's actually not so helpful. It can be destructive. You know, the water cooler conversations that we have, I don't know if we still have water coolers, but I mean, you know, just those conversations that we have can be very much dance floor where we're kind of caught. And so now let's try to gain some different perspectives about this. And for me, it's helpful to think about, so that it's not just, it can be us against the universe, but as I'm shouting into the abyss, like, not much happens. And so I think about three different kind of levels of efficacy, like three different places that I might think about to figure out my situation. The first one, as an individual who's a leader or who's working in an organization, is to think about the organizational level. And so from an organizational perspective, are they concerned about my well-being? Are they looking at burnout? And like, as an emergency physician, as I see a patient, I'm measuring vital signs, and I'm not going to make a diagnosis on a patient until I see what the vital signs are. For an organization, there are vital signs like the revenue, our cost, and you know what, burnout and well-being of our employees. Because we may have good revenue, we may have decreased cost, but if all of our employees are burned out, we know that we're going to have higher turnover. We know we're going to decrease quality. I mean, it's just all these bad sorts of effects. And so, does my organization support me as an individual and my own well-being to be able to do my best at my job? And so if not, you is this the right organization for you, honestly? And if not, are there things that we can do to help change the organizational kind of perspective? And so the second level I think about is just our interactions with each other. And so it's the way we run meetings. It's the way we as groups of colleagues come together to make decisions. And so, are we in meetings or are we in tellings? Am I being heard? Do I have a sense of autonomy? Do I feel like my voice matters? And that even maybe resources are limited, but am I able to get them? And are people nice? And, all these sorts of things that go into just the interpersonal interactions. And if I'm in a meeting where an individual's shouting at me, not so good. If I'm in a meeting where they ask me what I think, I say what I think, and then they quickly discount me and move on. Again, maybe there's something there. And so as a leader, this is, I think, where a lot of leaders have power, is like just to figure out how are we bringing groups of people together to make difficult decisions about complex issues. And it's a place where we can really boost engagement and boost the sense of being together and well-being. And then the last level is a level that I think a lot of people just first go to, which is that of the individual. And there's been this sort of idea that, well, if you're burned out, you need to be running, you need to be meditating, you must not be eating right. And it's kind of an individual issue, because maybe you don't have resilience, you don't have grit. And those components are important. I mean, if I know that if I haven't eaten well, if I've been up all night, I'm working night shifts, and I haven't exercised, I'm pretty, spiky. I'm not in my best mode, and so I'm going to try to do things to change that. So yes, there is that on the individual side, and then also on the individual layer, it's just the way that we're making sense of the world, and many of us hold these kind of fears and worries and things that make us want to micromanage things, or make us feel unsafe about speaking up, and when in fact we might be safe, or maybe oversay what we think. And these things can have our own effect. And so I think it's important to think about things from multiple levels, as opposed to just us or just the boss. And within there, we can find other ways of moving forward.
Yeah, I love it. So you also mentioned the researcher Carol Riff.
Yeah.
Because you talked a little bit about how, we have to be able to give autonomy to our people, et cetera. So now this is the layer of the organizational level that we're talking about here, right? Can we actually bring Carol's research of the 6 dimensions of psychological well-being into sort of the organizational level? Is that the more individual level stuff?
Oh, I think it's all this. And it's funny. So I get this talk about burnout to all of our new physicians and scientists at Mayo Clinic, and so there's like 100. It's probably 100 individuals, 150 people, a couple times a year, and I'll ask them a question: how many of you can name 6 causes of metabolic acidosis? Hands raise. How many of you can name all the cranial nerves? Hands raise. How many of you can name the 6 components of eudaimonic well-being or psychological well-being? Crickets. No, all right, I get it. So you can tell me, all the pathways of, the nervous system, but you don't know the very domains of your own well-being. How is that? And so I think that a lot of what we can be doing is, first of all, stepping out of just now this is burnout, and now starting to look at well-being and start to develop a language and understanding about that. And so Carol Riff, her psychological well-being has these 6 different domains. And as a physician, I use a lot of mnemonics, and so I put them in this form of mnemonics, which is pagers. And I still wear pagers. I don't know if it's kind of a mystery to a lot of people, but I'm oftentimes on shifts wearing 3 pagers, and I'm wondering, I have an iPhone, why do I have a pager? But so pagers, P is a sense of purpose, the sense that we're aligned with the organization and our colleagues with our purpose, our values, our mission. A is autonomy, the sense that what we say has an effect, is being heard, and maybe that they're not making decisions that we would have made initially, but we do sense that we're having an effect here. G is personal growth, the sense that we are in an organization or in a situation where we can get better because it feels good to get better. E, environmental mastery. And this is a sense that we have the resources that we need. And if we don't have the resources that we need, that we can understand why, and then try to figure out what to do about that. R is positive relations, because negative relations kind of stink. And then S, and this S is an important one. And you, I'm sure, see this also as an executive coach, is self-acceptance. Is leaders at all levels, I mean, the most senior leaders on down, our ability to accept that there are times that we make decisions or do things that, geez, gosh, I wish I didn't. I wish I hadn't have done that. And to be able to accept that and move on. Because if we're not self-accepting, we're just kind of ground in the past, and that can really hurt our sense of well-being.
I use a term that's very rare in corporate circles, and I actually call it, you have to forgive yourself, forgiveness work, right? To be able to get past these humps that you're maybe still hanging on to, or even grieving something, a decision that you made.
So I'm thinking about these three levels. I'm thinking about organizational, how we are acting together as teams, and then the individual level. And then I'm thinking about pages at each of those levels. How, as an organization, are we supporting alignment with purpose and mission and our values? How are we supporting autonomy? Are we measuring these things from the team-based perspective? How are we meeting together? How are we hearing things from the individual perspective? Then also, how are you making sure that you're finding personal growth? How are you reaching out to others to have these positive interactions? And now we can kind of connect different ways of thinking about it.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about engagement, because I almost see the section on engagement as almost overlapping with creating these conditions necessary for psychological well-being to happen. But so on chapter 5, you list several leadership behaviors that will decrease burnout and increase satisfaction in the workplace. What would you say are some of those key drivers of engagement?
Yeah, so and this I think is important for leaders to understand. This is almost like an open book test. And so there was research out of Mayo Clinic. And it was done by an individual named Lottie Derby, who's wonderful now at University of Colorado, where they each leader. So imagine you're a leader. Each of your direct reports got a 9 question basically set to see how you were doing. How are you doing in terms of developing them, finding avenues of personal growth? How good were you at displaying the values of the organization? How good are you? These sorts of things, and they found out that the better the leader was, the lower the rate of burnout and the higher the satisfaction. In fact, and this was, I believe was, as I'm remembering right, it was a 7-point scale. For every 1 point change, the burnout rate went down 9%. And so why you think like, okay, well, that's only a few points to eliminate burnout. Most leaders are on this kind of bell-shaped curve, and just some small incremental change in your ability to engage in someone from a personal growth perspective, or to help them feel safe about having conversations or develop, just one incremental point of change it has a huge effect on individuals and organizations.
Well, so sticking with sort of the overlap, one of the ways to engage, one of the key drivers is develop. But that also delves into the area of your psychological well-being as well, because you want to be able to grow. So the two kind of overlap.
Totally. And yeah, you can look at, so you can develop someone, you can recognize them as a leader, you're informing them about things that are going on within the organization, you're valuing them as individuals. All these things you can pare down, and there's specific aspects of the pagers of purpose, autonomy, that coincide with it, and oftentimes multiple different parts of that coincide with one action.
I love it. Okay, so one of the ways to overcome a difficult challenge is to do something that so many leaders will actually avoid doing. It's to meet our fears and worries head on, and talk about the tough issues. You said that one of the first things a leader will say is, whatever you do, don't mention this. And
right.
That very thing they mention is often the very topic that needs to be addressed. So we're kind of, bearing it. So talk through us a little bit about that, and why should we address our fears and worries as an important part of decision making?
Yeah, and so one of the things in the book I was talking about this primary care group that was very successful, having tons of patients, and not being able to schedule appointments. And so the leadership team, it was just an executive group of 4. 3 physicians and 1 nurse decided what they were going to do is they were going to open the clinic an hour early every day. And that's great. It makes sense, right? So you're going to see more patients. They presented it to the group, and the group was very upset. And so why is that? I mean, I guess as a leader, you can just push forward, and this is what we need to do. I mean, we're here to take care of patients, aren't we? So let's just open this up an hour early. That's not a problem, is there? But what was going on is there were fears, there were worries that individuals had with respect to that would really block the success moving forward. Some individuals would leave the clinic, some physicians would leave to work other. And so what are these fears and worries? And so fears, you know what, I have kids, and if we open an hour early, how am I going to get them to school? Or I have, there's a meeting I have at this time that is this area of personal growth, like that I'm meeting with other clinic people. And this is a way for us to get the group together. Or my fear is all you're doing is creating more time for work. And actually we have so much work, and I'm working 4 hours later in the day, just getting rid of all the paperwork. If you're not listening to these fears and worries while you're trying to figure out the solution to the problem, your strategy is going to be shot. And so the great thing about uncovering these fears and worries is that they can actually become kind of the energy that causes the group to come together to move forward for change. And so how do we meet the needs of patients? How do we expand our time in a way that allows us still to be able to take care of our children in the morning when we need to, and attend some meeting, and in a way that's maybe not going to increase the amount of work that we're having to do, that may actually decrease the amount of work that we're going to have to do. As you come together around these fears and worries, you want to decrease that chance. And then you may come up with different ideas of how to move forward in a way that would be even more effective. And so by kind of hiding the fears, the monsters in the dark, to come back and kind of devour your strategy, you're not only limiting the effectiveness of moving forward, but you're also limiting the energy that you gain together about overcoming these fears and these worries and creating new opportunities for how to move forward.
Would you say that the obstacle to overcoming these fears and worries, to bring this out in an open conversation, do you feel that perhaps it's the fear of vulnerability?
Yeah, I think that honestly, and this is one reason for the book, is that as I was coaching leaders, they just didn't know how to do it. And this is, and again, I'm a physician. And this physician can operate on a heart and put blood vessels together, but they don't know how to deal with like colleagues who disagree and move forward. And there are just some practices that we can put in place that you can use to try to bring these fears and worries together and move forward. And so it's just tactics and frameworks.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's been a great conversation, Richard. I want to ask you, what's your ultimate hope for people reading your book?
Yeah. We need good leaders. Honestly, we need good leaders. And as I'm thinking about leaders, like you're the leader, I think about whether it's a formal leadership where you have like an official role, a title, but also even more importantly, our informal leaders. Those of us who don't have a title, who have a huge effect on the organization, and to be able to understand why things may be effective or why things are not effective, and maybe why it's not you, maybe it's them, and to be able to understand how you can maybe change things. The better leaders we have, the better well-being we have, the better, like as a community, as a world, we are working together. So that's my hope. Yeah,
that's great. So the challenge of a podcast that we try to fit in under an hour, so it's hard to cover a whole book in that time span. So I'm going to give you a chance here to kind of tell us, is there anything that our listeners should know, that perhaps a question that I didn't ask that they need to hear? What would that be?
Yeah, I think a big component of being a leader is you oftentimes become a leader because of your expertise and you know what to do. And then as we bring that into our positions, we often feel this immense pressure to have the answer in these situations where, in fact, you can't have the answer. And so my hope is that it actually offers comfort to realize that entering these situations, whether this is one-to-one conversations with colleagues or whether it's with 100 people that you're leading, with the perspective that you don't know the answer, that actually what you are as a coach or a facilitator, trying to bring lots of diverse perspectives together to be able to then move forward, it is just such a healthier place to be. And our best leaders are that. They are not knowers. They're people who are facilitators and coaches.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Richard, as we wind down here, I pose you the leadership love question. That's tradition on this show. So of all the ideas discussed, or maybe something that we have not covered yet, in your own words, how do we as leaders at the highest levels lead with love day in and day out?
I think it really comes down to actively listening. and listening. And as I was talking about, my daughter who was talking about me washing my hands is trying to actively, like, what's going on here, as opposed to just responding. Or when I'm in a situation in a boardroom and someone is saying something that I disagree with, really actively listening, not only to what they're saying, but to my own kind of reflexive and emotional, oftentimes, responses to these situations. And so that to me, that is love, is this coming together and actively listening and understanding perspectives, and then being able to move forward in ways that are going to help certainly our colleagues out, and then in many ways ourselves out.
Beautiful. Well stated. We bring it home with 2 questions, as we do with every guest. Personally, Richard, what's really tugging at your heart right now that you'd like us to know?
Boy, what's tugging at my heart? I think for me right now, it's how do we scale social media discussions in a way where we're not so dichotomous, where we're not thinking about this or that and our in group and their group, and really developing conversations where people are safe and we can hear different things. I'd love to see that happen. I think it's a difficult ask, but I think it's something that we can move towards. And so that's one thing.
Boy, ain't that the truth? We are so divisive right now in our left-right trenches. So, we do need that more than ever. Finally, our guests close us out with a key takeaway from our discussion or a closing remark to keep us inspired.
Yeah, I mean, I just thank anyone who's listening to this, because you have this interest and you're learning about yourself and how to become a better, basically more effective individual for others, but also for yourself. And then to understand that this involves oftentimes this sense of risk, the sense of needing to be self-accepting, and working through a lot of difficulty. And so I thank you for doing that, putting the time and effort into doing that.
Richard, if people want to connect with you, find out more about you and your coaching services, where can they go? Yeah,
so I have a website that's very creatively named richardwinters.com. So you can go there. I'm also on social media in various places, and you can look up my name and I'm there.
Perfect. It's been a great conversation. I'm honored to finally have you on the show. We are all much better for it.
Thank you very much.
Keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And also look for my show notes on my website, marcelschwantes.com. You can find all the resources there on this episode, including Richard's contact info. And if you like to watch this podcast, it's been released on YouTube as well, and you can find a YouTube link to it on the episode show notes. And finally, hey, if you'd like to sponsor the show to help us spread the Love in Action movement globally, you can reach me also on my website or find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your business grow.